Welcome back. Confidential sources can be vital tools for any journalist trying to tell a story wherever reporters operate. And protecting those sources, protecting their identities, is vital in ensuring that sources feel safe enough to provide important information. That protection was recently challenged in a British court of law. Under a UK law called the Terrorism Act, authorities in Northern Ireland tried to force a journalist named Suzanne Breen to hand over information relating to a paramilitary group called the Real Irish Republican Army. Earlier this year, the Real IRA claimed responsibility for an attack that left 2 British soldiers dead. The journalist refused to reveal her sources, saying that her life would be in danger if she gave police that information. The core issue here is, when does the state have the right to force a reporter to hand over details about their sources? The Listening Posts Salah Khadr now on the journalist caught between the paramilitary group, the police, and the courts.
It's the worst attack in over a decade. Saturday's gun assault on the Masreen barracks left 2 British soldiers dead.
The killing in March of 2 British soldiers at the Masreen barracks in Northern Ireland was a glimpse back into the past troubles and a worrying premise for its future stability.
On the 8th of March 2009, 2 British soldiers were murdered at a British Army barracks in Northern Ireland. Suzanne Breen, a reporter covering Northern Ireland for a newspaper based in the Irish Republic called the Sunday Tribune, received a call from a group called the Real IRA, claiming responsibility. She passed on the message to the world's media.
He made no apologies, nor did the Real IRA, for targeting British soldiers while Britain continued to what he called occupy the north of Ireland.
The news generated huge interest.
The attack has led to new concerns about a resurgence of Republican violence.
It was a success for the Real IRA, who claimed responsibility for the attack.
The Police Service of Northern Ireland, the PSNI, wanted to know more about Breen's links to the Real IRA. Under the UK's Terrorism Act, it issued a court order to gain access to her computers, phones and notes.
I think the authorities want to deny the Real IRA the oxygen of publicity. I don't think they believe that I have any important or substantial information. I think it's really going after the messenger, and it's sending a signal out to other journalists that if you talk to these people and if you interview them, we will take you to court, we will seize all your materials and we could possibly imprison you.
Breen argued that her life would be in danger if she revealed her sources. Other journalists rallied to support her.
Talk to people who are working in Gaza. Talk to people who are working in West Africa, Democratic Republic of Congo. Talk to journalists who are working in Sri Lanka. Talk to these people and ask them about how serious it is that they can talk to people on various sides of a conflict on the basis that they will keep secret their identity.
She was faced with a choice: either go to jail for up to 5 years, or if she decided to hand over her notes, effectively sign her own death sentence. There's no doubt that the paramilitaries would have taken revenge on her. So when a journalist is faced with those kind of choices, it's vitally important they fight for the fundamental principle to protect sources.
On June the 18th, the court ruled in Breen's favour.
This is an absolute landmark decision that hopefully will set a precedent.
It ruled that her life would be in danger if she had to hand over information about her sources.
This was not only a huge case, but actually a huge victory as well, because on the one hand they recognised the right to life argument, which was important, but they also recognised the kind of special role that journalists have in being able to get information from whistleblowers, and recognise therefore that they have to be able to keep sources confidential.
Reporting in Northern Ireland is a difficult balancing act. Interference and intimidation from paramilitary and political groups is common.
There's only 1.7 million people who live there. Many of them are closely related, and certainly in terms of journalism, it's a particularly small world. What's it like to be a journalist who lives in Northern Ireland, cheek by jowl with some of the people you're investigating? I think it's very difficult. And that's before you put into the mix any political manipulation from government or major political parties. If you're trying to report on terrorism or nascent terrorism, very often these are people who live only streets away from where you live.
Breen's case highlights an important issue for journalists around the world. Is it ever right for the state to intervene and force a journalist to hand over information? Shiv Malik is a British journalist who had to hand over details relating to a book he was writing on Al-Qaeda in the UK.
It's an offence to not tell the police if you suspect anyone to be involved in a terrorist offence. The law was brought in ostensibly, everyone thought, to deal with the families of terrorists, right? So if they didn't tell the police, then that could be an offence. But it's also caught a lot of other people, including and journalists.
I would like to think that no other journalist will find themselves hauled before the courts like I have found myself.
You become essentially an arm of the state, and that's what journalists are not supposed to do. They have their own independent function, which is to give the public information, and they can't be seen as the police, because the public at large wouldn't trust them.
There are times when you can understand, maybe not support, but you can understand why the state asks for certain information, but they also have to understand that there is therefore a public interest defence for journalists to mount, and that should be a strong and robust defence.
It is impossible to talk about the political situation unless you talk to terrorists. The British government can talk to terrorists, the Irish government can talk to terrorists, but dissident journalists are not allowed to talk to terrorists because they might come back and tell us something we didn't know before.
It's vital to know what all sides in all conflicts have got to say, what motivates them, what justifies them, what makes them do the things that they do. And the business of proper journalism is that we talk to very good people and we talk to very bad people. And sometimes you have to do that on the basis of concealing their identity. It's absolutely critical. If you stop that, then you stop journalism and you stop freedom of speech. It's quite simple.
Police and journalists do completely different jobs. Journalists are not detectives. It is up to the police to chase those who have issued the message, who have threatened death and destruction in Northern Ireland, and not simply those who actually print the message. But in this case, police are going after the messenger rather than the message.
More Global Village Voices now on journalists and their sources.
I do not believe it is ever in the public interest for a journalist to hand over their files. They are not there to do the work of the police. If they become policemen by proxy, their sources won't trust them, and the public will not be fully informed on the issues of the day.
Sources risk their jobs and in many cases their lives to tell a journalist the truth. So if they begin to feel that their anonymity is jeopardised, if they're not protected or indeed respected, why would they bother to come forward?
Journalists should not be forced to hand over their sources. Journalists are not part of the state. If the state forces journalists to hand over their sources, this makes them part of the state. In order for journalists to do their job properly, we need a free press.
Finally, he's one of the most TV-friendly leaders in history, and he's got a press team that's second to none at wooing the world's media. However, are President Obama's image makers guilty of raising expectations just a little bit too high? Those clever people at Jib Jab who wrote the book on online political animations seem to think so. They've come up with their own rather over-the-top version of the presidential superhero. This is our web video of the week. We'll see you next time at the Listening Post.
He's Barack Obama, he's come to save the day. He passed a major stimulus for the bourgeois. Then said he'd have the deficit. Ha-ha. Stop unemployment, money died. Fix healthcare in his spare time. He's Barack Obama, he's come to save the day. He'll use his superpowers to win in Iraq. Then Kung Fu Chow the Taliban. Ka-chow, ka-chow. In the world he'll mend, then make the Jews and Arabs friends. He's Barack Obama, he's come to save the day. He'll spend the dough, write the checks, disregard the mountain debt. Stop the globe from getting warm, fuel your car with nuts and corn. Leave a building, run industry, save a kitten from a tree. Fix the schools, go to space, punch a robot in the face.